Welcome everyone to Lights Camera Podcast, a program dedicated to all those cinema lovers. I'm Sofia Erler and I'm glad to be one more episode here with you. In this episode, we'll be talking about Fantastic Mr. Fox, the movie that was based on Roald Dahl's 1970s book of the same title. As always, I invite you to get comfy and grab some snacks. With no further ado, let's get into this episode. This is the story of Mr. Fox and his wild ways of slaughtering chickens, stealing turkeys, and drinking cider. These are his instinctive and nightly adventures. But he has to leave those wild days behind to do what parents know how to do best. Yup, be responsible. But Mr. Fox is very rebellious, too wild, and will try only one more foray into the three most unpleasant and unlikable farmers, which are Walter Boggins, Nathan Buns, and Franklin Bean. This is a story about crossing the line between family responsibilities, the midnight adventure, friendships, and awakenings of this country life that is inhabited by Mr. Fox and his friends. So, this film is directed by the renowned director Wes Anderson, one of my favorite directors, known for being one of the greatest exponents of indie cinema. His cinematographic style, where he shows us his perfect aesthetic style as his almost perfect frames, his obsession with symmetry, and the color he uses, makes him the recognized director he is today. Among the other Anderson films, we have The Darjeeling Limited in 2007, The Grand Budapest Hotel in 2014, and his most recent movie, Isle of Dogs. Fantastic Mr. Fox was nominated for 2 Oscars in 2010, which were Best Animated Film and Best Original Score, which both lost against Up. You know, because there's no one better than Pixar when it comes to making animated and emotional movies. So it was a fair and clean win. The original score of this movie is literally mind-blowing, guys. I know I said that in the previous episode of Joker, but this is another type of mind-blowing score. It was composed by Alexandre Desplat, also known for composing the music for the last 2 Harry Potter films, The Tree of Life and The Shape of Water. This movie also features the voices of George Clooney, Meryl Streep, Bill Murray, among others. So, guys, let's jump right into it. The first topic I want to address is, what audience is this movie addressed to? As we can see, in very plain sight, is that this is an animated movie, but does this make it a kid-friendly movie? I think not, and let me explain why. Over the years, we have been presented with animated films that talk about topics for adults, or that only adults can appreciate. For example, we have Bambi in 1942, Grave of the Fireflies in 1988, and Les Triplets de Belleville in 2003. But, I'm not gonna get into that because that's a topic for another episode. Maybe I'll do an episode about that. I don't know. Well, the point is that Fantastic Mr. Fox is no exception. For me, till this day, it remains on my top 5 most adult animated movies I've ever seen. Think about this movie as a Pixar, but, reduced. There's everything from smoking, cussing that's actually disguised literally with the word cuss, and especially black humor and heavy adult topics. In Wes Anderson's fun and incredible witty script, he preserves all that classic dry comedy that has become his trademark. The one exception being that it comes from the mouth of animals he created. A really good way to dilute topics and humors. Good thinking, Wes. Good thinking. Okay, so throughout the movie, we get a lot of topics. The first one being that it emphasizes on existentialist problems. For example, Mr. Fox is constantly wondering why he had to be a fox and not another animal. He finds no purpose to his life or his mission on it. That's one of the reasons he sets out to steal from these farmers, to make sense out of his life again. One of the strongest issues in this movie are family problems. More specifically, marital problems, from the economic to the emotional. In one of the first scenes, we see how Mr. Fox says to his wife, "I don't want to continue living in a hole. It makes me feel poor." To which his wife responds, "We are poor, but happy." After that, Mr. Fox proceeds to talk about how he wants to give a better life to his family and get them out of poverty before he dies. Here he just implies that he's basically still not happy even though he has a family and a roof over his head and food. You know, he's always striving for more. Another thing that I really found amazing and kind of funny is that we meet another of the topics of this movie when we meet Mr. Fox's son, Ash. We realize that the movie also talks about, the issue of finding oneself and discovering our skills, our weaknesses, etc. We realize that Ash is actually afraid of being different and wants to be classified under some sort of tag or under something. You know, he wants to feel identified with something. Here, we start to understand the fear that teens have of not belonging anywhere, you know, since that classifies them as different. In the end of the movie, we end up comprehending that being different is not a bad thing. It's only that it's not normalized when it should be. There's nothing wrong with being different. Now, another thing is that when Mr. Fox buys his new house, which is a tree, a very beautiful rustic tree. God, I love it. He feels kind of fulfilled, you know, a tad happier, a little happier. But, you know, like I said, just a little. And that's why he decides to steal food from these farmers. Not only to give meaning to his life, but to provide for his family and feel better about himself. And this is something that happens nowadays in many families, if you stop and think about it, that they don't feel happy because they don't have or enough money, or they don't have the luxuries that they want, when in fact, maybe they don't have all of those things, but they have a roof over their heads and they're with their families, and they live day by day, but I think that should be enough to make them happy, you know? So as a result of all of these robberies and the lies come consequences, not only to Mr. Fox and his family, but the community of animals that live with them. After going through hell and escaping from the farmers and trying to survive with the other animal families, we arrive at the end of the movie, the final scene, where Mr. Fox finally realizes that his wealth and his happiness relies on the fact of being with those he loves and having friends who believe in him and being able to live day by day. So I think that's really very important. Now, there are 4 very interesting points that I would like to talk about. I think Wes Anderson put these points in the movie so that they're open to interpretation, maybe so we can use our imagination a little more. I don't know. Number 1, are Bogus Bonds and Bean the real villains? After watching the movie for like 10 times, and yes, I'm those kind of people who already know the dialogues to the movie, and having read the book like 5, I realized that the farmers might not be the villain. Some people do see them as if they were, but truth is, what would you do if someone is stealing your food or your crops? Will you do the same as them? I feel like the character who might take this shape as a villain is Mr. Fox. He not only lied to his wife, broke a promise he made to her at the beginning of the movie, put his life, his family's life, and the community where he lives in danger for stealing. It's a whole ratchet, and as good as his whole cause would have been, all of this could have been avoided if he didn't mess with the farmers. But like I said, you guys take out your own conclusions, okay? Number 2, the message left by Rat. Let's remember that Rat is the guard of Bean cider cellars, and he's a villain. And you know, the type of villain who does not question his purpose and is really attached to whatever means he has, you know, with a tragic fanatism. In the scene where Mr. Fox's nephew is kidnapped and everyone starts looking for him, Rat appears and wants to kill all of those who are helping Mr. Fox. Then Mr. Fox appears and there's a big fight, and where Rat dies, Mr. Fox says, "In the end, he's just another dead rat in the garbage can behind a Chinese restaurant," implying that existence is somewhat meaningless. Whether we do good or bad, we'll die and the world will continue without us. And will our existence have matter at all? I think not, because someday we'll all be forgotten. Somehow. Number 3, and this is actually my favorite point, the wolf. This is something that is really open to interpretation. Believe me, guys, I've heard and seen and read a lot about this. But my favorite is this one. Wes Anderson wanted to give us a presence of magnificent beauty, but that was always on the background. Powerful, unattainable, royal, but that he never interacted with the world. Kind of like God. Throughout the movie, in random moments, Mr. Fox eludes the wolf, and we get a sense that he holds the wolf in fear, but in absolute respect. Maybe Mr. Fox was acknowledging a superior being out there who saw everything, like God, and didn't interfere in the action. I think that may be possible. Number 4. Where the story takes place. The film is clearly set in England, according to Mr. Fox's morning paper and other clues. However, the wolf's alpine backdrop resembles the Canadian Rocky Mountains, and Kylie is a North American possum, and there are no possums or any marsupial relatives native to Europe. And on the Wagback Trophies Champions list, there's an MK silvery marmoset, which is a creature found only in very limited areas in Brazil. So maybe this movie takes place in an imaginary world made just for the story, like Narnia, but not exactly like Narnia. I think you get the idea, right? Right? And now, I'll give you the rates given to this movie. IMDb gave it a 7.9 out of 10. Metacritic gave it an 85%, and Rotten Tomatoes gave it a 92%. So what do you think? Did it deserve the rates it got? So that's it for this episode. I hope you liked it. And what did you guys think about this movie? Was it good? Bad? Meh? Let me know. Remember to follow Lights Camera Podcast on Instagram and now on Facebook to be notified of new content, to give your opinions, or decide what other series or movies I should talk about. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll tune again next week. Take care, drink lots of water, and keep consuming cinema. Bye!